In a realm governed by bloodlines and prophecies, Aurelia Sterling endures haunting visions of her own demise. Her life is fated to end at the hands of Alpha King Gregory Bastion. An ancient decree binds the king to solidify his reign through the sacrifice of his destined mate. For Gregory, this act is a grim obligation. For Aurelia, it is an inescapable fate. Yet when their paths cross, something extraordinary occurs. The mate bond ignites between them, unyielding and absolute. He is both her executioner and her soul's other half. In a world teeming with primal magic and shadowy schemes, their forbidden connection may either be their salvation or their undoing. The nightmare began with the cold, a relentless, biting chill that seeped through the thin fabric of her shift. Pine branches lashed at her face as she sprinted blindly through the forest. Her bare feet, numb and raw, stumbled over jagged roots and frozen rocks. Each breath tore through her lungs like shards of ice, forming clouds of vapor in the frigid air. She dared not look back. She could sense him behind her, closer with every heartbeat. A howl shattered the night silence, resonating with authority and dominance. It wasn't the lonely cry of a solitary wolf, but a command laden with finality. The sound reverberated deep within her bones, causing her to falter. Her ankle twisted painfully beneath her weight. She knew running was futile. No matter how far she fled, he always found her. Aurelia clawed forward, her palms scraping against the icy earth. Her body collapsed onto a patch of snow-covered ground. As she struggled to rise, a massive shadow loomed above her, blotting out the fractured moonlight. He was no longer a beast. He had taken human form. Trembling, she rolled onto her back to face her executioner. Broad shoulders spoke of strength capable of bearing the burdens of an entire kingdom. Though his features remained obscured by the dense shadows of the forest, his gaze burned into her soul. His scent carried traces of winter, pine, and something achingly familiar, an irony that twisted cruelly in her chest. He knelt beside her, his presence overwhelming. In his hand, he held a gleaming silver dagger, its blade whispering promises of death in the stillness. "It is the only way," his voice rumbled, gravelly and heavy with reluctant sorrow. She managed to choke out one word, the same plea she uttered every time. "Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "The prophecy demands it." The dagger descended, piercing the night with inevitability. Aurelia jolted awake, gasping for air. Her scream lodged itself in her throat as sweat soaked through her nightgown, the coarse sheets clinging to her trembling body. She was safe, or so she told herself. This time, she wasn't in the snowbound woods. Instead, she lay in her cramped dormitory room at Ironwood Academy, surrounded by walls of weathered stone. The stale scent of floor polish mingled with the damp chill of the chamber. But reality offered little comfort. The dream lingered vividly, more tangible than the stones encasing her. Always the same sequence played out: the chase, the shadow, the dagger, and the man. Alpha King Gregory Bastion. Though they had never met, his face haunted her dreams with clarity sharper than any memory. She pushed her shaking legs out of bed and walked over to the small, cracked mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, pale, haunted. Her silver eyes, the sole remnant of her noble lineage, appeared too large for her face. House Sterling, a name that once inspired respect, was now spoken with pity or even disdain. A fallen house. Aurelia splashed icy water from the basin onto her face, trying to shake off the phantom chill. It was all because of the prophecy. Every shifter across every territory knew the burden carried by the Bastion bloodline. The king had to secure his reign and protect his realm through the blood of his destined mate. For generations, this had been interpreted in only one way: a ritual sacrifice. The mate, when found, had to be killed, a brutal but necessary price to keep rogue threats at bay and ensure the kingdom's prosperity. To most, it was a somber, tragic myth. To Aurelia, it was a nightly torment. Her seer abilities, the magic that once made House Sterling powerful, were now her private curse. They didn't just show her a king, they showed her the king, and they showed him killing her. A shiver ran down her spine, unrelated to the cold. The other girls in the dormitory were already stirring, their whispers filtering through the thin walls. But not about her, not today. Today, the entire academy buzzed with a different kind of anxiety. Aurelia gripped the edge of the wash basin, her knuckles white. She knew why everyone was frantic. She knew why the academy's grounds were being meticulously groomed and patrolled by the king's guard. He was coming. Alpha King Gregory Bastion was arriving at Ironwood Academy today. Her heart pounded against her ribs, frantic like a caged bird. Her dream killer, her executioner, her fated mate. She had to hide. She had to find a way to become invisible. If he saw her, if he felt even a whisper of what she experienced in her dreams, it was over. How could you hide from a king? How could you escape destiny itself? A sharp knock on her door made her jump, her breath catching. "Aurelia Sterling," called a sharp voice. It was Lyra, the pack prefect. "Headmaster's orders. You're to be on the welcoming detail, front and center." The words echoed in her mind like a death knell. It was cruel irony. For 2 years at Ironwood, her status as the last of a fallen house had been a cloak of invisibility. She was always relegated to the back of classrooms, the edges of assembly lines, the forgotten corners of the dining hall. She had cultivated that invisibility, cherished it as her only defense. And now, on the one day her life depended on it, she was being forced into the spotlight. She moved as though in a trance, her feet carrying her forward despite her racing thoughts. The academy's central courtyard was already packed. Students dressed in formal gray uniforms stood in rigid, anxious lines. A clear pathway stretched down the middle, leading to the Great Hall's main entrance. The air buzzed with tension, anticipation thick enough to choke on. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of hooves announced his approach. Aurelia's hands trembled as she took her place among the students. Front and center. The 2 words felt like shackles binding her to her fate. She tried to steady her breathing, but each inhale felt shallow, each exhale insufficient. Her mind raced with fragmented plans, desperate ideas to disappear, to vanish into thin air. But there was no escape. The king was coming, and with him came the weight of prophecy, duty, and death. As the gates began to open, Aurelia's heart sank. The figure riding at the head of the procession was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, commanding presence, an aura of power that seemed to bend the very air around him. Alpha King Gregory Bastion. His gaze swept over the crowd, piercing, unrelenting. Aurelia fought the urge to shrink back, to melt into the ground. Instead, she stood frozen, her body betraying her fear. And then it happened. His eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, everything else faded. The murmurs of the students, the rustling of fabric, the distant clatter of hooves. There was only him, her, and the unbearable weight of connection. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, So brief she might have imagined it, but she knew better. Destiny had found her. Aurelia clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She couldn't let this happen. She wouldn't go quietly to her fate. As the king dismounted and began walking toward the assembled students, her mind raced. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to fight back. But how could she stand against a king, against centuries of tradition and prophecy? Her thoughts were interrupted by Lyra's voice cutting through the silence. "Students of Ironwood, bow to your king." The command snapped Aurelia out of her daze. Around her, heads dipped in reverence. She hesitated, then lowered hers as well, her heart pounding. The king passed by, his boots clicking against the stone path. Each step felt like a countdown to her doom. When she finally dared to look up, he was gone, vanished into the great hall. But the weight of his gaze lingered, heavy and inescapable. Aurelia exhaled shakily, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. Today wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something far worse. She could feel it in her bones. Destiny had marked her, and there was no hiding from it. As the students dispersed, Aurelia slipped away, retreating to the quiet solitude of the library. She needed time to think, to plan. The prophecy loomed over her like a storm cloud, dark and inevitable. But she refused to accept it without a fight. House Sterling may have fallen, but she was still standing. And as long as she drew breath, she would find a way to survive, even if it meant defying a king. Aurelia stood frozen in the front row, her position so close to the path that every sound and scent assaulted her senses. The polish on the guards' boots mingled with the charged energy of high-level alphas stationed along the perimeter. An eerie stillness blanketed the courtyard, replacing the usual hum of academy life with a collective tension so thick it could be cut. Then came the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel outside the gates, a rhythmic, deliberate cadence. Not an army approached, but something far more menacing, precision embodied in flesh and bone. And there he was, no longer a shadow from dreams, but real, solid, overwhelming. Alpha King Gregory Bastion filled the space like a tempest given form, his presence stealing the air itself from the room. Clad in stark black military attire, his uniform bore the gleaming silver crest of House Bastion at its collar. He was larger than she had imagined, taller, broader, commanding every inch of the space around him. His dark hair was cropped short, his jawline carved into an expression of controlled exhaustion. This was no ruler reveling in dominance. This was a man weighed down by power, burdened by its demands. But it was his eyes that struck fear deepest within her. Storm gray irises swept across the crowd with predatory intent, their cold sharpness slicing through bodies as if seeking something hidden beneath skin and bone. They were restless, unyielding, hunting for truths invisible to others. Aurelia's blood froze. Instinctively, she tried to disappear, tucking her head low and shrinking behind the broad frame of the boy beside her. Her breath hitched, trapped somewhere between terror and prayer. She willed herself to become nothing, a stone, a speck of dust, not human, not alive. He moved past them, flanked by guards whose very steps seemed synchronized with his own formidable stride. Aurelia's gaze flickered briefly toward the man walking just to his right, Lord Caspian, his chief advisor. Unlike those around him, Caspian exuded calm, his face gentle despite the storm brewing in their midst. Silver streaked his hair, softening his features, offering a stark contrast to the king's unrelenting intensity. Then Gregory stopped. Barely 10 feet away, he halted mid-step, his head tilting slightly, almost imperceptibly. It was as if he caught wind of something faint yet undeniable. That scent. Her scent. Aurelia silently begged for the breeze to shift, to carry her essence elsewhere, anywhere but here. But fate held its ground. His piercing gaze slid over the front row, brushing against her like an electric current burning through fabric and flesh alike. For one agonizing heartbeat, his eyes lingered. Confusion flickered first, followed swiftly by recognition, or perhaps suspicion. Before the moment could crystallize further, Lord Caspian leaned in, murmuring softly, breaking whatever thread of connection had begun to form. With barely a pause, the king resumed his march, sweeping into the great hall ahead of the students who filed in behind him like shadows drawn reluctantly into light. Aurelia found herself swallowed up by the mass, hemmed in on all sides, escape impossible. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind them, sealing her inside with the man who haunted her nights. The grandeur of the hall felt oppressive now, the vaulted ceilings looming like the walls of a tomb. Every breath carried weight, each inhale thick with anticipation and dread. On the raised dais stood Gregory Bastion, a figure of raw authority, untethered and unconcerned with the headmaster's obsequious welcome speech. His focus remained distant, as though the words washing over him were mere noise, irrelevant to the storm brewing within. His gray eyes roamed again, disconnected from the present, lost in a private, unyielding pursuit. Aurelia stood frozen at the heart of the hall, encircled by others, yet painfully alone. Her head remained bowed, her gaze trained on the gleaming stone floor. Don't look at him. Don't draw his attention. Be unseen. Be insignificant. She could sense his focus sweeping across the crowd, a tangible pressure that prickled her skin. It was getting closer, closer still. To steady herself, she silently recited the names of long-forgotten constellations, weaving them into a desperate mantra. His scrutiny reached her row. The heat of his presence radiated toward her. Her inner wolf, which had been cowering moments before, stirred strangely. Fear wasn't what gripped it now. It was alertness, anticipation. Pacing within the confines of her mind, it seemed drawn by an inexplicable force. Look, the command didn't come from him, but from somewhere deep inside her, from the most primal, untamed part of her being. Look. She resisted fiercely, keeping her eyes downcast, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Look. It was no longer a suggestion. It became an irresistible compulsion, as though an invisible thread tugged at her chin, forcing it upward against every instinct screaming for self-preservation. Slowly, inexorably, she raised her head. Her silver eyes, the emblem of her fallen lineage, locked with his storm-gray ones across the oppressive stillness of the hall. Time ceased to exist. It wasn't a spark. It was a cataclysm. A physical blow struck her chest, stealing her breath. The headmaster's voice, the rustle of students, even the air itself, all vanished. There was only him. A surge of agonizing, blinding energy tore through the space between them. It was recognition on a level beyond thought or reason. It was the universe violently reuniting two shattered halves of a soul. Mate. The word bloomed in her mind, not as mere thought, but as an undeniable divine truth. His composure crumbled. He sucked in a sharp, audible breath, his body recoiling as though struck. His eyes widened, the hardened mask of authority falling away to reveal raw, unfiltered shock. He knew. He saw her. He understood who she was. And in that same devastating instant, Aurelia comprehended too. The nightmare hadn't been random. The prophecy wasn't theoretical. The woman destined to die by his hand, it was her. The universe hadn't merely cursed her, it had crafted her into its cruelest joke. She was fated to love the man, fated to destroy her. Sound flooded back into the hall. The headmaster faltered, his words dying in his throat. Silence reigned as the king rose, his oak chair scraping loudly against the stone dais. He stared, directly, unwaveringly, at her. Every student, every professor, every royal guard turned their gaze. They followed the rigid line of their king's unbroken focus, their eyes landing on the one person who held his absolute, horrified attention. Aurelia Sterling was unveiled. The king's cold demeanor shifted subtly, though none could decipher its meaning. His piercing gaze never wavered, and under its weight, Aurelia felt both exposed and trapped. Whispers began to ripple through the assembly, but they sounded distant, muffled, like echoes underwater. All she could feel was the intensity of his stare, branding her very essence. Each second stretched into eternity, heavy with unspoken implications. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Yet nothing came, no words, no movement, only the unbearable tension that crackled in the air. Aurelia's mind raced, grappling with the enormity of what had just transpired. This wasn't fate playing a cruel trick. It was destiny rewriting itself entirely. She was bound to him, irrevocably, in ways neither of them could escape. And yet, the knowledge brought no solace, only dread. For how could she reconcile the inevitability of love with the certainty of death? How could she face him when every glance carried the weight of a prophecy neither wished to fulfill? As the moment lingered, the king finally broke the connection, tearing his gaze away as if physically pained. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it, the unspoken bond, the undeniable pull. Aurelia's identity, once hidden in plain sight, was now laid bare for all to see. And in that revelation, her life changed forever. Aurelia stood frozen, the weight of countless stares pressing down on her. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. In Gregory's eyes, she saw a storm, a clash of emotions. There was the initial flash of recognition, the fiery intensity of their bond, followed by something darker, colder, understanding. A shadow crossed his face as duty and prophecy took hold. He was going to do it. He would denounce her in front of everyone, label her the cursed mate, the realm's offering. Her legs trembled but held firm, bracing for what came next. Then he blanked. The mask of kingship fell back into place. His features, once alive with emotion, hardened into an icy indifference. Jaw clenched, he turned away. The vibrant thread of their connection didn't simply fade, it snapped. The rejection hit her like a physical blow, leaving her soul raw and aching. A gasp escaped her lips, soft and wounded, as though she'd been struck. Gregory addressed the headmaster without looking at her again. "My apologies," he said, his voice low and devoid of feeling, a fleeting distraction before moving on. With curt words, he dismissed the gathering and ended the assembly abruptly. Without waiting for a response, he strode out of the great hall, his guards trailing behind him like shadows. Lord Caspian among them. As soon as the doors closed, silence shattered. Whispers erupted like a breaking dam. Who is she? The Sterling girl, the one with no family. What did she do? Did you see his face? He looked ready to kill or claim her. Don't be ridiculous. She's nothing. Aurelia remained rooted to the spot, her cheeks burning with a humiliation so deep it overshadowed even her fear. This was worse than she imagined. He hadn't just seen her, he had known her, and in front of the entire academy, he had cast her aside. He had made his decision. He would follow the prophecy. But first, he ensured the world understood that she meant nothing to him. She bolted, pushing through clusters of murmuring students, ignoring their stares and pointing fingers. She ran from the hall, down corridors, not stopping until she reached her dormitory. For the rest of the day, she stayed hidden in her room, isolated. Lessons were skipped, so was dinner. The whispers pursued her anyway. She was no longer invisible. Now she was infamous. The girl who briefly caught the Alpha King's attention only to be discarded. Night fell. Sitting in darkness, Aurelia packed her bag quietly, yet decisively. She wouldn't stay. Running wasn't just a dream anymore. It was survival. She refused to become a sacrifice. Shoving her last tunic into the sack, a sound stopped her cold. A faint scratch. She froze, straining to listen. It came again. Scratch, scratch, from her window. Her blood chilled. Staring at the glass, heart pounding, she realized the impossibility. Her room was 3 stories up. The soft click of the window latch shattered the silence. Aurelia's hand shot out, grasping the first heavy object she could find, a thick book on territorial law. Her pulse thundered as the window slid open with deliberate care. A gloved hand gripped the edge, and a moment later, a towering figure clad in black slipped inside with predatory precision. The moonlight streamed through the narrow opening, illuminating his face. It was Gregory Bastion, the Alpha King. Gone was his formal regalia. Now he wore dark fatigues that seemed to blend him into the shadows. He stood tall, his presence overwhelming in the cramped space of her dorm room. "Get out," Aurelia hissed, her voice shaking but defiant. She raised the book like a weapon, her knuckles white from the strain. "Are you here to finish what you started? To silence me without witnesses?" His sharp command cut through the air. "Be silent." But this wasn't the cold, authoritative growl she'd heard earlier. His tone was raw, brittle, and edged with desperation. He yanked off his gloves, revealing restless hands. In the dim light, Aurelia saw the cracks in his usually composed facade. He looked haunted, almost broken. "Do you think you're the only one?" he demanded, his voice low and strained. Aurelia's fear wavered, giving way to anger. "Only one what? The only one you've terrorized, humiliated in front of everyone?" He moved closer, invading her already limited space until his presence filled every corner of the tiny room. The severed mate bond flared back to life between them, an unbearable pull that tugged at her very core. He fought it visibly, his body rigid with effort. "The dreams," he rasped, his eyes locked onto hers. "You think you're the only one who has them?" Her grip faltered, and the book slipped from her fingers, landing with a dull thud. Confusion flickered across her face. "What are you talking about?" He turned away, pacing the short length of the room like a caged animal. "Every night for a year, a forest I don't recognize. I'm running, hunting." His hand raked through his hair in frustration. I smell pine and frost, and you." He stopped abruptly, staring at his hands with revulsion. "I catch you. You're on the ground, and I have a dagger." His gaze met hers again, and the anguish in his eyes mirrored her own pain. "And I kill you." Aurelia's legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the cot. This man wasn't just her executioner. He was a prisoner of the same torment that plagued her. For months, he had dreamed of killing his own mate. "Today," he continued, his voice rough and unsteady, "when I was in the hall, I smelled it, the scent from the dream. I looked up and saw you." He shook his head, his expression twisted with disbelief. "It was you, my mate." The word fell from his lips like a curse. "When I walked away, I wasn't rejecting you, Aurelia. I was trying to save you from me." Her breath caught. He had used her name, spoken it softly, as if it carried weight beyond its syllables. "How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Gregory knelt before her, bringing himself to her eye level. His gray eyes burned with a fierce intensity, both terrifying and mesmerizing. "Because these aren't just dreams," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "There's something more, something darker." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "They are his visions, not ours. Someone is showing them to us, Aurelia. Someone is in our heads. Someone wants the prophecy fulfilled." Aurelia's mind raced, grappling with the implications of his words. The nightmare that had haunted her existence wasn't a forewarning from fate. It was an act of manipulation by an unseen enemy. The man kneeling before her wasn't the harbinger of her doom. He was another victim ensnared in this web. The realization transformed everything. The paralyzing fear that had gripped her melted away, replaced by a searing clarity and an anger that burned like wildfire. "Who?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who would do this?" "I don't know," Gregory admitted, the confession tearing itself from him. "But they are powerful. To infiltrate a king's mind, to plant a vision so vivid it masquerades as prophecy, this is no ordinary magic." The mate bond, no longer smothered by her terror, surged between them, filling the small room with its intensity. It was alive, pulsing with unspoken need and a profound, unsettling recognition. Gregory's gaze flickered to her lips, and she felt the presence of his inner wolf straining against his restraint. He was so close. The scent of pine and winter from her dreams enveloped her. It was real, and it belonged to him. He raised a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was electric, igniting a spark that arced between them. Aurelia gasped at the sensation, and Gregory recoiled as if scalded, snatching his hand back. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "That," he growled, his voice rough with strain, "is why this is so dangerous." He resumed pacing, a caged alpha unable to escape his confinement. "This bond, they're counting on it. They show us the horror, they show us the prophecy, and then they throw us together. They want me to find you, and they want me to believe the only way to save my people is—" He faltered, unable to complete the thought. "To kill me," Aurelia finished for him, her tone devoid of emotion. His eyes snapped to hers, flint gray and blazing. "I will not." The words were resolute, an unbreakable vow. "I will not be a puppet." Crossing to the window, he continued, "In public, I will continue to ignore you. You are to be nothing to me. It's the only way I can keep you safe, to make you seem unimportant to whoever watches." "And in private?" she asked, rising from the cot, a fragile yet newfound strength coursing through her. Gregory paused, his hand resting on the window latch. Turning slightly, he met her gaze. "In private, you are my mate, and you are my only ally." His expression was guarded, the mask of a king firmly in place, but his eyes betrayed raw vulnerability. "You are a seer. Your visions are the only weapon we have that they don't know about. They think they're controlling you with nightmares, but you can see more." "I can try," she said softly. "Good." He prepared to leave, swinging one leg out the window. Pausing briefly, he added without looking back, "Stay safe, Aurelia." And then he was gone. The icy night breeze swept into the room, but it couldn't compare to the bone-deep chill of his warning. Bound to the king by forces beyond her control, she was now a target for a nameless, shadowy threat. Trembling, she secured the window, her mind circling back to his words, "Trust no one." The isolation pressed down on her like the cold bite of the dagger from her recurring nightmare. Over the next fortnight, Aurelia Sterling lived a life divided, each day pulling her in opposing directions. By daylight, she became a ghost, just as Gregory had instructed. She weathered the whispers and the hostile glares, branded as someone who had briefly caught the king's attention only to be discarded just as swiftly. He was an unyielding figure, aloof and commanding, inspecting cadets at the academy or consulting with the headmaster. His gaze never once sought hers. The public rejection was so flawless that it often left her questioning the midnight promises they'd exchanged. But when darkness fell, everything shifted. He came to her, always discreet. A note slipped between the pages of her textbook, a subtle signal passed through an intermediary guard. Their encounters were fleeting, snatched in the forgotten corners of Ironwood Academy. Beneath the vast expanse of stars on the astronomy tower, amidst the ancient silence of the restricted library, or hidden within the crumbling confines of an abandoned stable, their world narrowed to just the two of them. Here, the king dissolved, and Gregory emerged, raw, weary, and burdened by secrets too heavy to bear alone. These stolen moments became a sanctuary where truth surfaced. "The rogue attacks are escalating," he murmured one evening, leaning against the cool stone walls of the library. His voice carried both frustration and exhaustion. "They're hitting our newly established supply lines, evading patrols as if they know our every move." Aurelia tilted her head, considering his words. "The dreams have stopped," she replied softly, her brow furrowed. "Since that night in my chamber, the nightmares haven't returned. But there are flashes, visions. They're fragmented, unclear." "What kind of flashes?" he asked sharply, turning to face her fully. She closed her eyes, trying to summon the images. "Smoke," she whispered, "fire, the metallic tang of blood, and a sound, a low, guttural chanting. It's not in any language I recognize." His expression hardened. "Dark magic," he said grimly. "I think so," she agreed, meeting his gaze. The air between them seemed to hum with tension, charged and electric. This was the crux of their struggle, not merely allies bound by necessity, but something deeper, more intimate. The longing hung thick in the space between them, a palpable ache neither dared to fully acknowledge. "They're growing bolder," Gregory continued, his tone dropping lower. "Another village has fallen, Stonebrook, near the eastern ridge." It was supposed to be a secret refuge under my direct protection. Only my inner counsel knew of its existence. Aurelia's heart sank. A leak, she breathed. Yes, he confirmed, his jaw tightening. There's a traitor among my council. A wave of dread washed over her. The enemy wasn't just lurking beyond the gates, it was inside, standing close enough to whisper lies into the king's ear. Before either could process the gravity of this revelation, the faint echo of heavy boots reached them, shattering the fragile cocoon of their meeting. The sound of a guard patrol heading their way, much earlier than expected, reached their ears. Gregory reacted in an instant, his arms strong and unyielding, wrapped around her waist, pulling her back into the cramped, dark space between two towering bookshelves. They were enveloped in complete darkness, pressed tightly together, chest to chest. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against hers, his breath warm on her temple. The bond between them surged, a silent explosion of energy in the blackness, and she bit her lip hard to stifle any sound as the guards moved past their hiding spot. The close call left them both shaken. Gregory's position within the academy was no longer secure, and the risks of their clandestine meetings had grown too great. He departed the following day, his exit formal and grim, leaving Aurelia feeling abandoned. He returned to the capital, leaving her surrounded by potential adversaries. Her sole focus now became seeing clearly. She immersed herself in her research, spending countless hours in the library, but this time prophecy wasn't her goal. Instead, she scoured texts for references to dark magic, mental manipulation, and the guttural language from her visions. The other students avoided her, giving her a wide berth. The king's former distraction had become the academy's resident specter. It wasn't in the library, but in the sterile stillness of the potions lab that the vision struck. She was carefully measuring dried wolfsbane, its sharp, bitter scent filling the air. Suddenly, the room dissolved, and she found herself no longer in the lab, but in a cold, pine-scented forest. It was her forest, the one from her nightmares, but this time she wasn't running. She was an observer, concealed among the trees. Below her, in a small clearing, stood a group of rogues. They were larger and more menacing than any she had ever encountered, their fur matted, their eyes glowing with a faint, sickly green light. They were waiting, restless and tense. Then she heard it, the chanting. It emanated from the center of the group, where a cloaked figure stood. His back was turned to her, and in his hands he held a small, intricately carved object made of jagged, dark stone. Magic radiated from him, thick and nauseating, like an oily sickness that churned her stomach. The rogues were under his control. She strained to see his face, desperate to understand who he was. As if sensing her thoughts, the man spoke. His voice was low and ordinary, distinct from the chanting. "The king's scouts will arrive by dawn. Allow 2 of them to escape. They must report what they witness. The rest are yours." Aurelia's blood turned to ice. This wasn't a random attack. It was orchestrated. This was the Stonebrook massacre. This was the leak. She pushed harder, determined to unmask the traitor. "Turn around," she willed silently. "Turn around." The vision began to fracture. The cloaked man stiffened, as though he sensed her presence. Slowly, he began to turn his head. She caught a glimpse of his jawline, a streak of silver at his temple, and then a searing pain exploded behind her eyes. Aurelia collapsed, the glass beaker of wolfsbane shattering on the stone floor beneath her. She gasped as she came to, her fellow students staring at her with concern. "She just fainted," one of them whispered. "Get a prefect." But Aurelia ignored their murmurs, scrambling to her feet, her mind racing. It was a trap. Gregory's scouts had been met to escape. They weren't merely outsmarted, they were being used. Leaning heavily on the wall, she stumbled from the lab. She had to warn him. She had to get a message to the capital. The image in her mind wasn't perfect, a cloaked figure, silver streaks at the temples, but it was something. For the first time, she felt like she was fighting back. Getting a message to the king proved harder than she'd imagined. Every dispatch leaving the academy was scrutinized, every raven meticulously logged. As a student, and an outcast no less, she had no access to the channels she needed. For 3 days, she wrestled with her fragment of knowledge, frustration boiling over until it felt unbearable. She was the king's only ally, and yet she was powerless. Then relief arrived unexpectedly. Princess Freya, Gregor's younger sister, appeared at the academy under the pretense of inspecting the women's dormitories. Sharp-eyed and observant, she carried herself with quiet authority that masked her royal status. Finding Aurelia sitting alone in the dining hall, Freya took the seat opposite her. "My brother is a fool," she said softly, ensuring only Aurelia could hear. "But he's not subtle about it. He hasn't stopped thinking about you since he left." Aurelia's head shut up. "I know he met someone who shook his senses loose. I also know he returned to the capital and immediately launched a private investigation into his own council. He trusts no one, except, perhaps, you." Freya slid a small sealed parchment across the table. "You have 1 hour. This will be in his hands by dawn tomorrow." Aurelia poured everything onto the page: the vision, the cloaked man, the green-eyed rogues, the dark magic, the silvering hair. All her fear, all her certainty spilled forth. When she finished, exhaustion washed over her, but there was no time to rest. Over the next few days, anxiety consumed her, and then it happened again. The vision returned. This time, it struck during the day. Crossing the main courtyard, she heard a calm, kind voice call her name. "Miss Sterling, a moment." Turning, she saw Lord Caspian standing there, hands clasped behind his back, a gentle smile softening his features. "I greatly admired your grandfather," he began, his tone cultured and smooth. "Sterling was a pillar of this kingdom. It's tragic to see it so diminished." His voice was unfamiliar, too polished, too measured. The figure from her vision had spoken low and rasping. Relief washed over her briefly. This couldn't be him. "You honor me, my lord," she replied, bowing her head slightly. "I only hope," he continued, his eyes crinkling warmly, "that the king's recent attentions haven't given you false hope. He is a man of duty, after all. He understands what the prophecy demands." A chill ran down her spine, cold tendrils of dread wrapping around her heart. "I don't understand what you're implying," she stammered. "Naturally, you wouldn't," he replied, his smile unwavering yet chilling. "Allow me to offer you counsel, young one. Fate is vast like the sea, and there are times when surrendering swiftly proves kinder than battling the inevitable." With a courteous yet frosty nod, he turned and walked away. That evening, the haunting vision returned. The same secluded glade, the same band of outlaws, the same enigmatic figure cloaked in shadows. This time, however, Aurelia approached it differently. She remained still, observing silently, patiently. As the man concluded issuing commands, he pivoted to depart, his hood slipping back momentarily as he glanced at the moon. His face was not warm or benevolent, but sharp, unyielding, and brimming with calculated ambition. There was no mistaking it. It belonged to Lord Caspian, the man orchestrating everything from behind a facade of grandfatherly charm was none other than him. Aurelia's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't merely witnessing, she was present within the vision itself. And then he sensed her. His gaze shot toward her concealed position, eyes narrowing into slits in the darkness. Though unable to see her, he felt her presence. "Who goes there?" he barked, his tone now harsh and guttural, stripped of its usual smoothness. Aurelia tore herself free from the vision with a gasping shudder, collapsing onto her cot. Her heart pounded wildly. He had detected her. The most perilous man in the realm, the puppeteer pulling countless strings, now knew someone had been watching. She had to inform Gregory, face to face, not through correspondence. It took 2 days for her to escape Ironwood unnoticed. Using the remnants of her family's dwindling resources, she bribed a cart driver, hiding among barrels of salted fish. Every bump on the road heightened her paranoia. When she reached the capital, a sprawling fortress of gray stone, she encountered an impenetrable barrier of guards and red tape. She was nobody, a girl from a disgraced household with no access to the king. In desperation, she invoked the only name that might help, Princess Freya. "Tell her Aurelia Sterling seeks an audience." It was a risk, but it paid off. Hours later, Freya smuggled her inside via a servant's entrance, her expression fraught with concern. "What brings you here? You look as though you've encountered a specter." "I have," Aurelia whispered. "I've seen the traitor. I must speak with Gregory." Freya escorted her to the king's private chamber. Gregory stood hunched over a map, deep in thought. Upon seeing Aurelia, his body stiffened. "Aurelia, why have you come? It's unsafe." "It's Caspian," she blurted, words spilling forth uncontrollably. "Lord Caspian is the traitor. I saw him. He commands the rogues using dark magic. He orchestrated the Stonebrook massacre. Everything has been under his control. He's the one urging you to kill me." Shock or relief would have been expected reactions, but instead, silence reigned. Gregory's initially astonished expression hardened, transforming before her eyes. The ally she once knew disappeared, replaced by the imposing figure of the king. "Caspian," he repeated, his voice low and laced with danger. "Yes, I saw him in a vision. His face, his voice," Gregory repeated, his tone devoid of emotion. "It was him, Gregory. I'm certain of it." "No." The single word struck like a hammer blow. "Absolutely not. He served my father for 30 years. After my mother died, he raised me." Gregory advanced toward her, his eyes burning with cold denial. "He is the most loyal man I have ever known. You're wrong." Aurelia flinched but held her ground. "I am not wrong. He's deceiving you. He has 2 faces, 2 voices." "The man you saw, the one I saw," Gregory interrupted, "was in a vision, a dream, a fleeting image conjured by a girl whose family is known for instability." His words hit her like a physical blow. He had weaponized her fallen house against her, the one thing she believed would lend her credibility. "You asked me to see," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You told me it was our only weapon, and now you dismiss me?" "I told you to trust no one," he roared, his composure shattering. And you come here, to the heart of my castle, with an accusation that could ignite civil war, all based on a nightmare? You dare accuse the man who has been like a father to me." She could see the internal conflict tearing him apart, the man who loved her versus the king who revered his mentor. And the king was winning. "Bring me proof," he snarled, his gaze as hard and unyielding as the stone walls around them. "Bring me something tangible, a witness, a letter, anything real. I am a king. I cannot destroy my most loyal advisor over the word of a seer from a disgraced lineage." He turned his back on her, a gesture so final it felt like a door slamming shut. "Leave my castle. You are not safe here, and you are not welcome." Aurelia stood alone in the corridor, the heavy solar door clicking shut behind her. The sound echoed like the closing of a prison gate. He hadn't merely dismissed her claim, he had called her unstable, using her family's legacy as ammunition against her. The man who had sworn to be her ally had abandoned her completely. The betrayal cut deep, a cold blade twisting in her gut. But beneath the pain, a fierce, feral anger began to smolder. Gregory wanted proof? Fine. If he wouldn't listen in private, she would force him to hear her in public. If Caspian already suspected her, if danger was imminent, then hiding was futile. Her only chance was to drag the truth into the light, no matter how blinding or dangerous. She knew the King's Council was meeting. She had passed the great chamber earlier, hearing the low murmur of voices within. It was reckless, it was madness, and yet it was all she had left. With deliberate steps, she walked, not ran, toward the council chamber doors. 2 guards, clad in the silver and black livery of House Bastion, moved to block her path. "The council is in session. You are not permitted," one guard stated firmly. "The king will see me," Aurelia replied, channeling every ounce of authority she had left. Before they could reach for her, she pushed past them forcefully and swung open the heavy oak doors. The room fell into an abrupt silence. 20 of the most influential alphas in the kingdom turned their heads, their private discussion abruptly interrupted. Gregory sat at the head of the expansive table, his expression stormy and unreadable. To his right, Lord Caspian sat with a carefully crafted look of gentle, grandfatherly concern. "Aurelia," Gregory's voice rumbled, low and laced with warning. "I told you to bring me proof," she shot back, her voice ringing out through the vast, now silent chamber. Her trembling finger pointed directly at the king's advisor. "And I am here to tell this council that Lord Caspian is a traitor." Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of disbelief and outrage. "Insolence," one lord bellowed. "She's lost her mind," another muttered. But Aurelia ignored them, her gaze locked onto Caspian, who watched her with an air of calculated pity. "He is the one controlling the rogues," she continued, her voice growing stronger with every word. "He uses forbidden magic to orchestrate the attacks, to destabilize the kingdom, to manipulate your decisions." She paused, her eyes blazing. "I saw him. He orchestrated the Stonebrook massacre. He is the enemy we've been hunting." Chaos erupted. Lords leapt to their feet, shouting over one another, demanding her arrest. Accusations of blasphemy filled the air. Through the uproar, Lord Caspian remained seated, his face a portrait of sorrow. Raising a hand, he slowly brought the room back to reluctant silence. His kind eyes turned not to Aurelia, but to the king. "My liege," he began, his voice smooth and tinged with regret, It is as I feared. The fall of her family, the weight of recent events, it has fractured her mind. Clearly she is not herself. She has projected her delusions onto me. Turning to Aurelia, his tone dripped with false sympathy. My dear, you are unwell. He painted her as hysterical, a delusional girl grasping at power. In that room of aged, powerful men, it was an easy narrative to believe. Aurelia looked desperately at Gregory, her last hope. "Gregory, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You know me. You know what I'm capable of. Don't let him." "Enough," Gregory's voice cut in, cold and final. He rose, his face as impassive as stone. Without meeting her eyes, he addressed the guards who had followed her in. "The council is adjourned. Escort Miss Sterling to her quarters. She is unwell and is no longer permitted in the royal wing." The betrayal stung sharply. He had sided publicly with his advisor, dismissing her as a liar. As she was led away, Lord Caspian's eyes gleamed with cold triumph. She was no longer a threat, just a mad girl, easily dismissed. Trapped within the gilded cage of the guest quarters, Aurelia felt the weight of her failure pressing down on her. Though the room was luxurious, adorned with silk and finery, it was still a prison. The door was locked from the outside, and a guard stood watch down the hall. She had played her only card, and it had been a catastrophic mistake. Not only had she failed to expose Caspian, but she had handed him the perfect weapon to discredit her. Aurelia paced the room, her thoughts a storm of betrayal and confusion. The bond she shared with Gregory throbbed dully, an ache of rejection that refused to dull. He hadn't believed her. Despite seeing the truth in her eyes, he had chosen the lie. She knew Caspian wouldn't wait long. His ambition demanded action. He needed to cement his victory, to remove her from the board permanently. The next morning, the blow fell. A commotion erupted in the hall. Alarms blared. Shouts of treason and spy echoed through the stone corridors. Her door was flung open, and it wasn't Caspian who entered, but Captain Valerius of the King's Guard, his face as unyielding as a clenched fist. Behind him stood Gregory, his expression grim, and farther back, Lord Caspian, his eyes glistening with what appeared to be heartbreak. "What is this?" Aurelia demanded, dread pooling in her chest. "Search the room," Valerius barked. The guards moved with brutal efficiency, overturning her mattress, tearing apart her travel bag, ripping tapestries from the walls. From the fireplace, one of the guards called out, holding up a small oilskin bundle retrieved from the chimney. "What have you found?" Gregory asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The guard unwrapped the bundle to reveal a detailed map of the royal grain routes, the very routes ambushed just the week before. Tucked within the folds of the map was a small leather pouch. Valerius opened it, releasing a sulphurous stench into the air. Black powder, unmistakable and damning. "This," Valerius declared, "is the same substance found at the Stone Brook massacre." "It's a lie!" Aurelia screamed, her gaze locking onto Caspian. "He planted it! He put it there! Gregory, you know he's the traitor!" Caspian turned to the king, tears shimmering unshed in his eyes. "My liege, I had hoped it was only madness, but this is high treason." Aurelia pleaded with Gregory, her eyes desperate. "Remember me. Remember our bond. Remember the library. Remember your vow." He looked at the map, then at the black powder, and finally, slowly, at her. His face was blank, devoid of emotion. The man who had once climbed through her window, the ally who had held her in the dark, was gone. There was only the king. "Aurelia Sterling," he said, his voice cold and resonant in the silent room. "You are hereby charged with high treason and conspiracy with the enemy. Seize her, take her to the cells." The guard seized her arms, and though she fought, she was weak. "No, Gregory, don't do this. He's lying to you. He's the one." Gregory turned his back as they dragged her away. The dungeons were a shock of cold, damp stone after the guest quarters. The air reeked of mildew, straw, and despair. They threw her into a cell, the iron bars slamming shut with a sound of finality. She was done. She had lost. The man she had come to love, the man who was supposed to be her other half, had condemned her. He believed the frame-up. He had chosen the word of his advisor over the frantic, desperate truth of his own mate. The bond felt like a cruel, fiery chain, tethering her to the man who was about to seal her fate. Time blurred into an endless haze of shadows and distant water droplets. She drifted in a fog of despair until footsteps broke the silence. Unlike the heavy thud of guards, these were light, deliberate steps. Lord Caspian emerged from the darkness, his face illuminated by a flickering torch. The kind, grandfatherly facade was gone, replaced by cold satisfaction. "You really are a fool, little seer," he whispered, his voice as harsh as she'd heard in her vision. "You?" she gasped, clutching the bars as she rose to her feet. "Me?" He smiled thinly, devoid of warmth. "Did you truly think your beauty and a fated bond could undo a plan decades in the making? I've guided this kingdom since before you were born." "Why?" she choked out. "Why do this to him? He loves you. He trusts you." "He is weak," Caspian spat, all pretense of civility vanishing. "He, like his father, clings to mercy and understanding. This kingdom thrives on strength, on purging the weak. The prophecy demands it. The king must spill the blood of his mate, a sacrifice to forge him into the ruthless ruler we need." You want him to kill me?" "Of course, and now he will, not as a mate, but as a traitor. The outcome remains the same. The realm will witness him condemn the one he was bonded to. They'll see duty overpower love, cementing him as a legend." He leaned closer. "You should have stayed invisible." He left her in darkness. The next day, she was dragged back to the council chamber. It wasn't a trial. It was a sentencing. Gregory sat on the throne, his expression as hard as stone. "Aurelia Sterling," he began, his voice resonating through the room, "you have been found guilty of high treason. The evidence is absolute." She looked at him, her heart shattering. "Don't do this. Please, Gregory. See me." His eyes met hers, cold, empty, and final. He was unrecognizable. "For your crimes against the crown and collusion with our enemies," he declared, his tone commanding authority, "you will be confined to the high tower to await your public trial. The verdict is guilty. The sentence is death." The high tower was no dungeon, yet it was still a prison. Circular, with a single barred window, the room offered a view of the city far below. She was alone, a spectacle for the crows circling overhead. The betrayal had hollowed her out, leaving only a cold void where the bond once resided. Caspian had triumphed. Gregory had believed him. She was going to die. 2 nights passed. She refused food, staring blankly at the bars, waiting for the executioner. On the third night, she heard a sound, not the heavy bolt of the guard's door, but the soft click of a key turning in the lock. She pressed herself against the far wall, her heart racing. A small, cloaked figure slipped inside and quickly bolted the door. The figure lowered her hood, revealing Princess Freya. Aurelia's voice was barely audible, rough and strained. "We don't have much time," Freya whispered urgently, her tone low and tense. "Are you hurt?" "Hurt?" Aurelia's despair twisted into a bitter, hysterical laugh. "Your brother just signed my death warrant. He believes Caspian. He called me a traitor. He left me to rot." "You fool!" Freya hissed, crossing the room in a flash to grab Aurelia's arms. "He's protecting you." Aurelia stared at her, confusion clouding her face. "What?" Freya's grip tightened. "Think, Aurelia. Use that sharp brain of yours. The moment you accused Caspian in the council, you were as good as dead. Caspian would have had you poisoned, stabbed in a corridor, or accidentally killed by a rogue arrow. He couldn't let you live. The only place he couldn't get to you was in official custody. But the evidence, he believed it. He knew it was planted," Aurelia protested weakly. Freya's eyes burned with intensity. He saw the look on Caspian's face. He knew, but he had no proof. The council was with Caspian. If he had defended you, they would have turned on him, called him weak or worse, your co-conspirator. Caspian would have staged a coup within the hour. Aurelia's mind reeled. "So, the dungeon, the trial, it's all a show?" "Exactly," Freya confirmed. "By publicly arresting you as a traitor, he's playing Caspian's game. He's made you a public spectacle. Now Caspian has to wait for a public trial. He can't just murder you. And that trial, Aurelia, that's Gregory's arena. He's only pretending to be Caspian's puppet. He's buying you time." The love she thought was dead surged back to life, overwhelming and brilliant, flooding her chest with both pain and clarity. He hadn't betrayed her. He had saved her. "He sent me," Freya said, her eyes gleaming fiercely in the dim light. "He's back in the solar, tearing apart 30 years of Caspian's records, looking for proof. He's doing his part." She pulled a dark, heavy cloak from beneath her own. "Now we do ours. What are we doing? He can't get you out, but I can." Freya's lips curled into a sharp, feral grin. "Gregory is investigating the man. You and I, we're going to investigate the prophecy. We're going to see the Oracle Alicia." The escape was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Freya moved with precision, navigating the castle's secrets, the hidden passages, the servants' stairs, the blind spots and patrol routes. They moved like shadows, every distant shout and clang of steel sending Aurelia's heart pounding harder. Freya was risking everything. This was treason, plain and simple. They reached the stables, the air thick with the scent of hay and horses. 2 saddled horses awaited them. "We ride northwest, and we don't stop till dawn," Freya commanded, swinging onto her horse with practiced ease. They burst from the stables into the moonlit streets of the capital, their horses' hooves clattering against the cobblestones. The city blurred past them as they galloped through its winding roads, the cool night air biting at their faces. Every shadow seemed alive with potential danger, every noise magnified in Aurelia's ears. Yet Freya rode with unshakable determination, guiding them steadily toward their destination. For Aurelia, the journey felt surreal. Her thoughts raced between gratitude for Gregory's cunning plan and dread over what lay ahead. The Oracle Alicia was shrouded in mystery, her prophecies feared and revered in equal measure. Could they truly uncover answers there? Or was this another gamble, another leap into uncertainty? As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the horizon, the weight of everything pressed down on Aurelia. betrayal, survival, hope, they all intertwined in an intricate web that seemed impossible to untangle. But one thing was clear: she wasn't alone anymore. Freya's fierce loyalty and Gregory's quiet sacrifice reminded her that even in the darkest moments, alliances could form where least expected. And so they rode on, chasing not just the truth, but also the fragile promise of redemption. They rode swiftly past the city gates, where Freya's royal insignia granted them passage without question, and into the vast, shadowy wilderness beyond. Aurelia didn't glance back. She was now a fugitive, branded as the realm's most wanted traitor. For days, they traveled through desolate paths, avoiding main roads, sleeping in ditches, and subsisting on meager supplies Freya had brought along. The journey was grueling, yet Aurelia felt an unfamiliar, fierce hope burning within her. Gregory was fighting for her, trusting her, even when his actions couldn't show it. Now, she had to uncover the truth that could save them both. One night, huddled by a small, smokeless fire, Aurelia finally voiced what had been weighing on her mind. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you risking everything for me, for him?" Freya stared into the flickering flames, her expression unreadable. "Caspian has manipulated my brother for far too long," she replied quietly. "Gregory is a good king, but he's been blinded by a man he sees as a father. It's time someone opened his eyes." A wry, humorless smile crossed her lips. "Besides, I've never cared much for that sanctimonious old goat." Their path led them to the foothills of the Serpent's Tooth Mountains, where the climb began in earnest. The Oracle Alicia did not reside in a temple, but in the Whispering Glades, a place steeped in ancient primal magic, known only to a select few. As they ascended higher, the air grew thinner, and Aurelia felt her seer magic thrumming faintly, resonating with the raw power emanating from the mountains. After 2 more punishing days of travel, they found it, a hidden grove where towering white-barked trees stood sentinel, their leaves rustling despite the absence of wind. At its heart lay a moss-covered hut, and standing in the doorway was an ageless woman who seemed to have anticipated their arrival. Her milky white eyes betrayed no sight, yet they pierced through Aurelia like daggers. "You are late, daughter of Sterling," the oracle intoned, her voice as dry and brittle as autumn leaves. "The king plays his game of shadows while you flee a fate you do not comprehend." She turned her blind, all-seeing gaze directly onto Aurelia. "You seek answers about the prophecy. You think you understand the question, but you scarcely grasp the meaning behind the words." Aurelia stepped into the moss-laden hut, Freya close behind. Inside, the air was thick and warm, heavy with the scent of drying herbs and something timeless, like ozone mingled with dust. The oracle, Alicia, was already seated beside a low burning fire, her milky eyes fixed unerringly upon them. Though Aurelia knew the oracle saw nothing and simultaneously everything, her presence was unnervingly commanding. "You speak of questions and prophecies," Aurelia said, her patience fraying after the arduous journey. She knelt on the earthen floor. "I am here for answers. The prophecy states that the king must secure his reign by the blood of his destined mate. Does it mean he must kill me? I've seen visions, a traitorous man pulling strings to ensure this comes to pass. Is there a way to stop it? Can I alter this fate?" The oracle's lips curled into a dry, mirthless smile. "You are but a child clutching at a dragon's tooth," she rasped. "You come to my grove, marked as a fugitive and a traitor, and ask if you can defy fate itself. You, the one whose bloodline is fate itself." Freya stepped forward. "Oracle, my brother, the king, is fighting for her. He is trying to undo a conspiracy. We need to know the truth." Alicia scoffed. "The truth is that you are all blind. You hear blood and think death. You are children who have only ever known war, so you see only weapons." She leaned forward, her blind gaze pinning Aurelia. "The prophecy does not say by the death of his mate. It does not say by the sacrifice of his mate. It says by the blood." "But what other meaning is there?" Aurelia pleaded. "The most powerful meaning, little seer," Alicia replied. "The meaning Caspian, in his blind ambition, has forgotten. The meaning Gideon, in his darkness, seeks to destroy." The oracle's voice dropped, becoming a resonant, powerful chant. "It is not the blood spilled. It is the blood shared. It is the blood of the lineage, the blood of the legacy. It is the lifeblood of the bond itself, the most powerful magic in this realm, the union of two fated souls." Aurelia's world tilted on its axis. Lifeblood? Lineage? "You mean the prophecy was never a curse, child," Alicia continued. "It was a promise. The king's reign would be secured not by a death that would forge him, but by the one thing that could truly unite the packs: a new generation, a child, a legacy of life. That is the blood of his destined mate that will spare the realm." "The nightmare, the dagger," Aurelia whispered. "It wasn't a vision of fate." "It was a perversion, a lie whispered by Caspian and his master, designed to make Gregory murder the very person, the very lineage that was meant to save them all. So Aurelia's voice trembled, "I have to live." "You must," Alicia confirmed. "But the traitor you exposed is only a pawn. His master, the one who hides behind the dark magic, is the true threat." The oracle's face suddenly tightened, her head turning as if listening to a distant scream. "He knows the web is broken, and he is coming." Her blind eyes found Aurelia's. "You have your truth. It is time to stop running. Your trial is set to begin. And you, daughter of Sterling, must be present to claim your destiny." Aurelia looked at Freya. Her heart pounded like a hammer. The oracle wasn't telling her to hide. She was telling her to return to her own execution. Returning to the capital was more dangerous than fleeing it. They were fugitives, and Caspian's men would be watching every road. But Freya was royalty, and Aurelia was now armed with a truth more powerful than any sword. They rode with a grim new purpose, slipping into the city under the cover of a merchant's caravan just after dawn. The city buzzed with anticipation. The trial of the king's traitorous mate was the only thing on anyone's lips. Aurelia didn't sneak into the castle. She didn't hide. She and Freya walked straight to the main gates of the great hall, where the tribunal was set to begin. When the guards saw her, they drew their swords. "The fugitive, seize her!" the words rang out. But Aurelia stood firm, her voice cutting through the murmurs of nobles and commoners alike. "I am no fugitive," she declared, clear and unwavering. "I am Aurelia of House Sterling, and I am here for my trial." The guards hesitated, their blades lowering, as she moved past them with quiet determination into the packed hall. Hostility, Curiosity and jeers swirled like a storm around her. At the front, on an elevated platform, sat the council, with Gregory at its center upon the high throne. His face was stone cold, exhaustion etched into every line, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of shock as they met hers. His grip tightened imperceptibly on the throne's armrest. To his right sat Lord Caspian, smug and composed, a cruel smile playing at the edges of his lips as his predatory gaze locked onto her. She had walked straight into his trap. "Aurelia Sterling," Caspian announced, rising to his feet. His voice resonated throughout the chamber, heavy with feigned solemnity. "You have spared us the trouble of a hunt. Do you come to confess your treason?" "I come to speak the truth," Aurelia replied, her voice steady despite the weight of countless accusing stares. The trial unfolded as a mockery of justice. Caspian paraded his so-called irrefutable evidence: a map planted to incriminate her, a pouch of dark powder meant to suggest sorcery, and 2 guards whose shifty eyes and nervous hands betrayed their corruption. They swore, falsely, to having witnessed Aurelia sneaking from the rookery, no doubt sending messages to enemies of the realm. Caspian paced before the throne, each step deliberate, his tone dripping with venom. This girl, embittered by the fall of her house, conspired with our foes. She exploited her influence over our king to steal our secrets. She is a spy, a traitor, and a witch. The crowd erupted in chaos. Cries of death and traitor filled the air until Caspian raised a hand for silence. "It breaks my heart," he intoned, though his expression remained cold and calculating. "But it seems the prophecy will be fulfilled, not by some fated sacrifice, but by a righteous execution." Turning to Gregory, he continued, "My king, the people demand justice. Fulfill your sacred duty. Cast aside any lingering affection for this creature and cleanse the realm. I ask for the sentence of death." All eyes turned to Gregory. Still seated, his face gave nothing away. He had not once looked at her, nor offered any defense. The bond between them felt like a void, screaming in its emptiness. Was this part of his plan, or had she misunderstood everything? Slowly, he rose, his black cloak settling around him like a shadow. His storm-gray eyes finally met hers, devoid of warmth. "Aurelia Sterling," his voice boomed through the hall. "You have heard the charges. You have seen the evidence laid against you. Have you anything to say in your defense?" The room fell silent, anticipation thick in the air. Caspian's smile widened, confident in his victory. But Aurelia, fortified by the oracle's truth, stood tall. "I do," she began, her voice ringing out with newfound strength that silenced even the whispers. "I have no defense, for I have done nothing that requires one. I have only the truth." Caspian chuckled softly, patronizing and dismissive. "The truth, my dear? And what truth might that be?" Aurelia ignored him, her focus unshaken. She gazed beyond the hostile council, ignoring the jeering crowd. Her eyes locked onto Gregory. "Lord Caspian has labeled me a traitor," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "He's presented you with maps, powders, and bribed men. He claims I'm mad." She paused, drawing in a deep breath. "He may be a skilled storyteller, but I am a seer. Do not fall for his lies. I will reveal his truth." Caspian's composure cracked as he barked. "This is madness! She's stalling! Seize her!" "Let her speak," Gregory commanded, his tone flat but his eyes ablaze as they met Aurelia's. Before Caspian could protest further, Aurelia closed her eyes. This wasn't a small, contained vision. It was a psychic storm fueled by the oracle's revelation, her fury, and the unyielding power of the mate bond. She felt her magic surge, a wave of silver light visible only to her. She located the mental link Caspian had forged in her nightmares and tore it open, reversing its flow. She didn't just project, she broadcasted. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Everyone, the council, the guards, the crowd, even Gregory and Caspian himself, was yanked from the room. They stood in a moonlit forest, watching Caspian, hood down, his face cruel, issuing orders for the Stonebrook massacre. "Let 2 escape. They must report what they see. The rest are yours." The vision shifted. They saw him planting the map in her chimney, sneaking through the castle like a shadow. Then they witnessed him in the dungeons, his face lit with triumph as he confessed his entire plan. Forge him in fire, make him the ruthless ruler we need. The torrent of irrefutable truth lasted less than 10 seconds, but felt like an eternity. It ended as abruptly as it began, slamming everyone back into reality. The hall erupted in disarray. Lords clutched the table for balance. Guards stared at their trembling hands. The crowd sat in stunned, horrified silence. They had all seen it. They had all heard it. Caspian stood frozen, his grandfatherly facade shattered, replaced by a mask of waxy disbelief. His eyes, wide with shock and pure rage, found hers. "You psychic bitch," he snarled. That single outburst confirmed everything. The guards, acting on instinct, turned their swords away from her and pointed them directly at the king's most trusted advisor. Gregory Bastion rose from his throne, his face no longer a mask of calm authority, but a portrait of cold, controlled fury. "Lord Caspian," he growled, his voice low and terrifying. "It seems you have a new trial to attend." Chaos erupted. Council members shouted accusations of treason and demanded Caspian's arrest. Cornered and exposed, Caspian shed his kindly facade, revealing the ruthless killer beneath. With viper-like speed, he drew a long, thin dagger from beneath his robes. But he didn't lunge at Gregory. Instead, he turned toward Aurelia, his face contorted with hatred. "You ruined everything." Gregory moved with the speed and precision of a storm, his black cloak billowing behind him. He leapt across the dais in an instant, intercepting Caspian mid-strike. There was no contest. With a sharp, decisive motion, Gregory's forearms struck Caspian's wrist, the sound of breaking bone reverberating through the now silent hall. The dagger fell to the stone floor with a metallic clang. Gone was the hesitation that once defined him. Gregory had become the embodiment of authority, the Alpha King. He seized Caspian by the throat, twisting the man's shattered arm behind his back before throwing him violently to the ground at the foot of the throne. "Guards!" Gregory's voice was a low, commanding growl, heavy with power. "Bring the truth-teller's chair." A collective gasp rippled through the council. The chair, an ancient artifact carved with runes and imbued with magic, had not been used in decades. It was a relic designed to wrench secrets from the deepest recesses of a person's mind. Caspian, pale and trembling with pain, was dragged upright and secured into the iron seat. An elderly truth-seer placed her hands on his temples, her voice steady and unyielding. "Speak," she ordered, "and speak only the truth." Standing over him, Gregory demanded answers. "You conspired against the crown. You murdered my people. Why?" Caspian's body writhed under the influence of the chair's magic as he spat out his response. "You are weak, just like your father. You needed to be forged. The prophecy demanded sacrifice." Gregory's voice was ice cold. "You were wrong. Who did you work with?" Caspian choked on his words, struggling against the overwhelming force of the magic. "Not for me," he rasped. "For the true Alpha, the one who understands strength, the one who will restore the ancient bloodlines." Gregory leaned closer, his presence suffocating. "His name," he commanded, the weight of his authority pressing down. Caspian thrashed, his throat raw, but the magic was relentless. "Gideon," he roared, the name tearing from his lips like a wound being lanced. The room erupted in horrified whispers. Gideon, a name spoken only in shadowy legends. A banished alpha from a rival bloodline, exiled 2 decades prior for practicing dark magic and attempting a coup. Many believed him dead. Gregory exhaled sharply, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. The rogues. It's not just an army, it's his army. Caspian, delirious with pain and madness, began to laugh, a shrill, broken sound. "You think you've won, boy? You think this is over? He's been waiting at the Red Summit, waiting for your armies." His eyes burned with manic intensity as he locked gazes with Gregory. "And your scouts, following my maps, are leading your entire legion straight into his trap. They march even now." The great hall transformed into a war room within moments. The solemn tension of the trial gave way to the frenzied urgency of impending conflict. Generals spread maps across the massive table, their expressions grim. The Red Summit, a narrow, treacherous pass in the northern mountains, was the perfect location for an ambush. One general pointed to the map, his finger tapping the marked area. "He's right. Our main force is here, scheduled to make camp at the base of the summit by nightfall. If Gideon's forces are positioned in those hills," Gregory didn't need to finish his thought. "This is Caspian's intelligence," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's all been a deception. He's been feeding Gideon our movements for months while lying to us." The council erupted into chaos. "We must recall the Legion," someone shouted. "There's no time. They'll be massacred before a message can even reach them," another countered. "Send the Capital Guard, attack from the south, and try to break the pincer." As voices escalated, Aurelia stood near the throne, her hand resting on the cold stone. Through their bond, she felt Gregory's panic, despair, and fury. She tried to focus, to push past the noise and see clearly. Suddenly, the world dissolved around her. The vision was not gentle, it was violent and excruciating. She was no longer in the hall, but high above the Red Summit. Below her, she saw everything. Gregory's legions, loyal and unsuspecting, marched into the pass. She saw the glint of dark magic, the eerie stillness of the rocks. Then came the trap. A rock slide, fire, and a torrent of green-eyed rogues controlled by dark magic pouring over the ridges. It was a massacre, a perfect, inescapable slaughter. But the vision shifted abruptly, pulled by an unseen force. It flew south, swift as a raven, away from the red summit. Over the lowlands it soared, heading toward the capital until it stopped at Shatterstone Ravine. And there she saw him, Gideon. He wasn't at the red summit. Instead, he stood at the ravine with an even larger army. Beside him, a lone scout rode hard for the capital. Aurelia's breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. The red summit was the trap, but not for Gregory's army. It was a diversion, a bloody sacrifice meant to draw every soldier Gregory had. Meanwhile, Gideon, with his true army, advanced on the undefended capital. Caspian's confession had been another lie, a final brilliant misdirection. Aurelia gasped, her eyes snapping open. Stumbling forward, she collapsed against the war table, scattering maps across its surface. "He's lying," she choked out. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. Every gaze turned to her. Gregory was at her side instantly, his hands gripping her shoulders, the first time he'd willingly touched her in public. The contact sent an electric jolt through them both, a surge of strength and connection. "Aurelia, what is it? What did you see?" he demanded. Her silver eyes met his storm gray ones, wide with the terror of her vision. Caspian's confession, it's a lie, a trap within a trap. Her trembling finger pointed to the map. The army at the red summit is real, but it's a sacrifice. Gideon isn't there, he's here. She tapped the location firmly. Shatterstone Ravine. He's letting his forces at the summit be discovered to lure all your troops north. While we're distracted, he's marching on the capital now. The war room froze, the weight of Aurelia's words sinking in. A terrifying, impossible truth hung in the air. The generals stared, their faces pale with shock. "It's a guess," one of them protested weakly. A faint possibility. But doubt crept into their expressions as they processed the implications of her revelation. The entire legion cannot be diverted from the red summit due to a mere vision. Are you doubting your queen? The sharp interruption came as Princess Freya appeared in the doorway, clad in armor and armed for battle. "She is not yet my queen," the general countered. "She is my mate," Gregor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The room fell silent. He moved toward the war table, his gaze locked with Aurelia's. The sting of public rejection, the trial and betrayal faded, leaving only the unshakable trust of his trust. With a sweep of his arm, he cleared the old maps from the table. "You saw him. You are certain." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I am," Aurelia replied firmly. "The red summit is a slaughterhouse designed to weaken us. Shatterstone Ravine is the dagger aimed at the capital's heart." Gregory assumed the role of Alpha King. "General Valerius," he commanded, "take 2 companies of the Royal Guard. Ride for the red summit. Create chaos, harass their flank, but do not engage. This is a diversion. Slow them down, save as many of our men as possible, then retreat." "And the capital, my king?" Gregory unsheathed his sword, its ring echoing through the hall. "The capital is my fight. Gideon wants my throne. He will have to pry it from my corpse. We ride for Shatterstone Ravine. We ambush the ambushers. For the crown, for the realm." A unified roar filled the hall. They rode out, a small elite force of 200, led by their king. Aurelia rode beside him, no longer dressed in a prisoner's shift, but in black leather armor provided by Freya. She was no longer a victim, but a weapon. Shatterstone Ravine was a jagged scar in the earth, a deep, narrow canyon that served as the fastest southern approach to the capital. They arrived an hour before dusk, the low sun casting treacherous shadows. "Where?" Gregory murmured as his company of alphas dispersed silently into the rocks above the gorge like ghosts. Aurelia closed her eyes, extending her senses. The dark magic left a bitter taste on her tongue. It was close, coiled, and hateful, waiting to strike. "They're hidden at the mouth of the ravine in the scree fields," she said, waiting for the scout to confirm the capital is undefended. Gregory signaled silently. His men moved into position, becoming the trap. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on them. Then they heard it, the sound of a single horse galloping hard. The lone scout approached, passing through the ravine. As he did, the ground began to shift. Gideon's army emerged from the earth, rogues cloaked in dark magic, their eyes glowing with a sickly green light. At their head stood a towering figure in black iron armor, Gideon. "Now," Gregory said, and the first volley of arrows rained down from the cliffs. Boulders prepared by Gregory's men crashed into the canyon, sealing the rogues inside. Gideon looked up, his face contorted with pure rage. This was not what he had expected. "Bastion!" he bellowed. Gideon's forces surged forward as Gregory roared, leading his men down the slope. Steel clashed with claw in a maelstrom of dark magic and brute strength. Gregory moved like a tempest, his black armor gleaming, his alpha power radiating outward, strengthening his soldiers. But Gideon's rogues were no ordinary wolves, devoid of pain, driven by blind obedience. On the ridge above, Aurelia stood motionless, her eyes shut tight. Though not a warrior, she was a psychic anchor, her mind sifting through the tangled threads of dark magic controlling the rogues. One by one, she severed them. Freed rogues paused mid-battle, howling in confusion before turning against their former allies. Gregory caught sight of her, a radiant figure atop the cliff, and pressed onward toward Gideon, determination etched into every stride. Victory seemed within reach until a new danger emerged. From the shadows on the far ridge, Lord Caspian appeared, bloodied, broken, but consumed by madness. Escaping the dungeons amidst a chaos, he now clutched a heavy crossbow, its aim fixed not on Aurelia, but on Gregory's unprotected back. The battlefield raged around them, a deafening symphony of violence and sorcery. Gregory fought with unrelenting ferocity, his blade slicing through enemies as he carved a path toward Gideon. His fury burned bright, fueled by betrayal and the bond he shared with Aurelia. Yet even as Gideon struggled to maintain both his army and his position, it was Aurelia who tipped the scales. Her silver light pulsed brighter with each rogue she freed, unraveling Gideon's control thread by thread. The once terrifying beasts faltered, reduced to mere wolves, confused, vulnerable, mortal. Aurelia felt it before she saw it, a fresh wave of malice, sharp and deliberate. Her eyes flew open, scanning the ridgeline. There stood Caspian, a grotesque silhouette, his shattered body propped against the rocks. The crossbow steadied in his grip, aimed directly at Gregory. Recognition dawned in Aurelia's mind. This wasn't random vengeance, it was calculated cruelty. If Gregory couldn't be forced to kill his mate, then Caspian would take matters into his own hands. The bolt gleamed ominously, fletched in black feathers and coated in a sinister oil. Wolf's bane, a poison lethal to their kind. There was no time to shout a warning. The string snapped taut, launching the deadly projectile. "Gregory!" Aurelia screamed, her voice cutting through the din. Without hesitation, she hurled herself down the incline, feet slipping over loose stones. It was futile. The distance was too great, the bolt too swift. Gregory turned at her cry, catching only a glimpse of the black streak hurtling toward him. He raised his shield instinctively, but it was too late. Aurelia lunged, throwing her body between Gregory and the incoming threat. She didn't merely shove him, she hurled herself at him with every ounce of her strength, a desperate, full-bodied tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. Gregory's roar of shock ripped through the air as Aurelia let out a piercing scream. The bolt had missed his heart, but it hadn't missed her. It was lodged deep in her shoulder, just below the collarbone. The pain hit her instantly, a searing, unrelenting blaze of agony that consumed her entirely. This wasn't just a wound, it was a chemical inferno, an all-encompassing burn that radiated through her body. She gasped, clawing at the injury, but her fingers were already going numb. "Aurelia!" Gregory's voice transformed from fury to sheer terror. He scrambled to her side, his hands hovering over the black-fletched bolt protruding from her flesh. Already, he could see the dark veins spreading outward from the wound like a spiderweb, creeping inexorably toward her heart. Her silver eyes met his, wide with shock and pain. It burns," she whispered, her voice trembling. On the distant ridge, Caspian watched as his shot found its unintended mark. But instead of dismay, a manic laugh erupted from him, a high, broken sound of triumph. The prophecy was still being fulfilled. The mate was dying. Gregory looked down at Aurelia, at the poison racing through her veins, and realized he had mere moments, perhaps only seconds, to act. The world around them seemed to shrink, narrowing to the single excruciating point of the wolf's bane embedded in her shoulder. Gregory cradled her close, his armor now stained with her blood. The battle raged on around them, Gideon pressing his advantage, Freya shouting orders, but they were cocooned in their own private storm. "No," Gregory growled, his voice raw and broken. "I didn't find you just to lose you. I won't let this happen." He thought back to the oracle's words, the blood of his destined mate, not death blood, life blood, lineage, bond. It wasn't a curse, it was the cure. "Heal," he commanded, his voice low and fierce. Nothing happened. The poison continued its relentless march, her breathing growing shallow and wet. Caspian's laughter echoed mockingly from the ridge. Gregory's desperation ignited into primal alpha rage. This wasn't a plea. It was a demand. Ignoring the corrosive burn of the wolfsbane, he placed his hand firmly over the wound. Closing his eyes, he reached deep within himself, not just pushing his magic, but pulling on the mate bond, the living, divine thread connecting their souls. "You are my mate, Aurelia Sterling," he roared, his voice resonating with ancient authority, shaking the very earth beneath them. "Your life is mine, your blood is mine, and I command you to live." What followed wasn't healing, it was an exorcism. He poured everything he had into her, his life force, his vitality, his pure alpha magic, and the blazing energy of the bond itself. Wolfsbane, born of dark magic and death, could not withstand the raw, divine tower of life coursing through her. Aurelia screamed as the surge of energy flooded her body. Это было fire meeting fire, консумирующее и пюрифицирующее. Black вены сизали и смочили, прежде чем begin it recede. The poison был burned away, cleansed from her system. Грегори вырвал болт из ее плеча и с изумлением наблюдал, как рана сама собой затянулась, оставив после себя лишь чистую новую кожу. Аврелия судорожно вдохнула, глубоко и прерывисто наполняя легкие воздухом. Ее глаза распахнулись. Серебристые радужки больше не были просто серебряными. Они светились, пронизанные тем же бурным серым цветом, что и у него. Она была исцелена. Он поднял ее на ноги. Им не нужно было говорить. Слова стали лишними. Они больше не были двумя половинками. Они стали единым целым. Повернувшись вместе, они встретили битву лицом к лицу. Аврелия подняла руку. Теперь она уже не просто разрывала нити, она видела источник. Она увидела Гидеона, его темную ауру, пульсирующую от силы. Она заметила поток черной магии, текущий от него к его армии. Аврелия сжала кулак, разбивая эту связь. Вся армия предателей рухнула. Сотни волков завыли от боли и замешательства, когда зеленый свет в их глазах угас. Темная магия испарилась, оставив их смертными. Гидеон пошатнулся, схватившись за голову. Его крик ярости разорвал тишину. Его власть была сломлена. Подняв взгляд, он увидел, как Грегори прыгнул на него. Если раньше Грегори был бурей, то теперь он стал ураганом. Его пара чуть не погибла, его королевство оказалось под угрозой. Его гнев был праведным. Бой между двумя альфами не был поединком, это было казнью. Грегори был быстрее, сильнее, каждый его удар был точен. Он обезоружил Гидеона, сломал ему руку и швырнул на землю, вытянув когти прямо над горлом узурпатора. Выжившие предатели заскулили и поклонились. Стража столицы ликовала. Битва закончилась. Солнце вставало. 6 месяцев спустя великий зал стал неузнаваем. Мрачные тяжелые гобелены войны сменились знаменами серебряного и золотого цветов, цветов дома Бастион и возрожденного дома Стерлинг. Зал был заполнен не враждебными лордами, а лидерами всех стай королевства, на лицах которых читалась надежда. Это не был суд, это была коронация. Аврелия стояла на возвышении, не в кожаных доспехах, а в платье цвета полуночного неба. Грегори с короной на своей голове стоял перед ней. В его руках была изящная серебряная корона королевы. «Аврелия из дома Стерлинг», — произнес он, голос которого обычно звучал как рык командира, но теперь дрожал от переполнявших его эмоций, доступных каждому. «Ты была провидицей, которая увидела истину, союзником, который обнажил тень, воином, спасшим своего короля, и парой, которая спасла его душу». Он возложил корону ей на голову. «Я нарекаю тебя Аврелией Бастион, королевой всех стай, моей королевой, моей парой, моей жизнью». Он поцеловал ее, и зал взорвался радостными криками, которые заставили стены замка содрогнуться. Их правление стало новым рассветом. Королевство, долгое время жившее в страхе перед неверно истолкованным пророчеством, теперь руководствовалось состраданием и правдой. Гидеон и Каспиан томились в самых защищенных камерах, лишенные своей темной магии. Принцесса Фрейя, теперь глава нового совета, помогала внедрять новые законы. Выжившие предатели, освобожденные от контроля Гидеона, не были казнены. Им предоставили выбор: join a rehabilitation program guided by pack elders or face exile to the wastelands. The majority opted for healing. Aurelia, now celebrated for her gift, freely utilized her visions. She predicted a crop blight, enabling the kingdom to diversify its food reserves and avert famine. She pinpointed the location of a crumbling mountain pass, saving an entire village. Far from being a curse, she was a blessing. One evening, months later, Gregory entered their solar. Exhausted from a lengthy council meeting, His expression softened at the sight of her. She stood by the large open window, gazing out over the tranquil moonlit capital. He approached her from behind, encircling her waist with his arms and pulling her close against his chest. His hands rested gently on her stomach, which was no longer flat, but beautifully rounded. "The kingdom is secure," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "Yes," she whispered in response, covering his hands with hers. "The prophecy," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "is fulfilled," she completed. Turning in his arms, her silver eyes shimmering with love, she looked up at him. The blood of his destined mate. It was never about death, my love. She pressed his hand firmly against the curve of her stomach, where their child, their legacy, grew. It was always about life. Gregory lowered his head and kissed her, a long, tender kiss imbued with profound peace. They had been foretold as harbingers of tragedy, a curse upon their people. Yet they had faced their predetermined destiny and rewritten it with love, trust, and extraordinary courage. Their journey had transformed what seemed inevitable into a testament of hope and renewal. Together, they embraced a future filled with promise, their bond unbreakable amidst challenges overcome and lives intertwined. Their shared vision transcended fear, forging a path illuminated by unity and resilience. As time passed, Aurelia's insights continued to guide and protect the realm. Her foresight fostered prosperity and safeguarded communities, earning admiration and gratitude. The once feared prophecy evolved into a symbol of redemption and growth. Through every trial, Gregory remained steadfast by her side, their partnership exemplifying strength through adversity. United, they cultivated harmony within the kingdom, nurturing not only each other, but also the land and its people. Their story inspired generations, echoing through history as proof that even the darkest omens could be reshaped by unwavering devotion and collective will. In moments of reflection, Aurelia marveled at how far they'd come, from isolation and mistrust to becoming pillars of hope and transformation. Each day reaffirmed her belief in the power of connection and understanding, values she carried forward in all aspects of her life. Gregory, too, found solace in their shared purpose, drawing strength from her unwavering spirit. Together, they built more than just a family. They created a legacy rooted in compassion, wisdom, and enduring love. This foundation would carry them and those who followed into a brighter tomorrow. Their tale served as a beacon for others navigating their own struggles, reminding everyone that destiny is not fixed, but shaped by choices made with heart and resolve. Even when shadows loomed, light prevailed through acts of kindness, courage, and collaboration. In this way, Aurelia and Gregory's union transcended personal triumphs, sparking change that rippled across borders and generations. What began as a daunting prophecy unfolded instead as a narrative of healing and possibility, proving that true power lies in the ability to rewrite one's fate with grace and determination.